Hello everyone, welcome to Glendale Tech Week, second annual Glendale Tech Week. Really excited to be here to talk about machine learning and education. Specifically, I wanted to shout out to the city of Glendale for hosting this event here in Glendale, as it's important that people in LA know that tech exists outside of these communities, and we do have tech throughout the LA County area. So to start with, let's talk about the pervasiveness of machine learning in our life. Every search on Google, every conversation with Siri or Alexa you have at home, and every news article you see on Facebook is influenced by a computer and algorithms. So whether you like it or not, we are in the age of big data, and it's influencing what we do, what we hear, what we see, and what we learn. In terms of our panel today, really fortunate to have two fantastic panelists. We have Armin from Glendale Community College, who is a professor of robotics. In addition, he's a bona fide rocket scientist working at JPL. Rare to meet one of these. Also rare to meet is a teacher turned data scientist, who we have here with Liz Owen. Liz is a co-founder of a school here in LA, a charter school in LA, serving underserved youth, as well as a PhD in digital media and education from the University of Wisconsin, and an expert in educational data mining, which is a field, I would like to say growing field, or relatively very small field in terms of education. So in terms of agenda today, there's there were supposed to be four of us. There's three of us. We want to keep this as conversational as possible. The agenda is 45 minutes of some discussion and questions up here on the stage, followed by some Q&A with you in the audience. I'd like to kick it off with introductions and some background on what each of you do, and let's take it away.
Okay, hello everyone, thanks for being here. My name is Armin Korean, as you heard in the bio and the introduction already. I'll just talk about a few projects that I've worked on over my career. So the first thing I think I got involved with was something called the CubeSat program. That was kind of an international movement towards miniaturizing satellites using commercial laptop and cell phone technology that was becoming really popular at the time. Now that's grown into hundreds of schools, universities, government agencies, big companies, small companies, all launching satellites. So it became space much more accessible to the public and to smaller companies. Making launches from multi-million-dollar things, endeavors, to things that cost maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's important because a lot of companies like Planet Labs is one that was bought by Google. They plan to take pictures of every square foot of the planet multiple times a day. And so instead of getting Google Earth updates, monthly or however often they happen, you're going to be able to see your car in the driveway, and a couple hours later, you're not going to see your car in your driveway. So that's one interesting thing. After that, I went and worked at JPL, mostly on Mars missions. So a lot of different elements. I worked on the actuators that are used on the rovers that drive things like the wheels and the robotic arm. I also worked on the landing team for Mars Curiosity in 2012, and now I'm mostly involved with system integration and testing for Mars 2020 mission, which is kind of a follow-on mission for Curiosity with more advanced instruments and things like that. And most applicably, the last 4 years I've been teaching at Glendale Community College in robotics and engineering, and we have a lot of interesting courses that we're developing, one of which is called our capstone course, and it's basically purely project-based class where we take a bunch of students. We're fortunate enough to have myself and two other working engineer faculty members, and we kind of specialize in different areas, and we pick a project at the beginning of the class. We don't know what it's going to be. We kind of architect it among the faculty. We really act more like mentors and supervisors. We treat the students like employees and give them tasks and assignments just like you would at a workplace. So it's a very realistic experience for them, and also teaches all the things that you don't get in your regular curriculum, like soft skills, how to communicate your ideas, how to resolve conflicts, how to present your work, things like that.
All right, please. Testing.
Hello, as Neil mentioned, I'm currently the Director of Learning and Data Science at Age of Learning. My background is, as he mentioned, 10 years in teaching. I was a co-founder of a charter school in Los Angeles that's still here that focuses on arts education for underserved students as well as a robust core curriculum education. And one thing we focused on there, similar to Armin's work, is project-based learning. So really, in my classroom, there was a giant landform made out of styrofoam. Not SimCity, but something similar than a physical form, and we worked from there and integrated all subjects across a project-based learning curriculum. So students really got a chance to build their own solutions to problems and had a lot more sort of strong critical thinking and problem-solving skills developed as a result. Contrary to what some pedagogies put forward, kids are not just empty vessels that you unscrew their brains and pour knowledge and experiential knowledge and you know, a meaningful context for learning is really important, which is part of what drives my work at Age of Learning, and I'm really excited to be a part of it. From teaching, I actually realized that the more technology I used in the classroom and the more game-based learning I used in the classroom, the more excited my students were. And this was true across SES levels that I had experienced. The charter school, Los Angeles Academy of Arts and Enterprise, is 95% free and reduced lunch, and 75% English language learners. And we were really excited in the classroom by the enthusiasm brought on by technology and games. I also learned that assessment is the tail that wags the dog. So no matter how interesting our project-based learning work got, our funding and our measurement was always calibrated with multiple choice tests at the end of the year. And understanding the power of assessment and understanding the power of games led me to pursue graduate work in game-based learning so that we could really leverage the engagement of games and understand what kids are learning as they play instead of a once-a-year summative assessment that's on a piece of paper that's multiple choice. I think those kind of measurements also have their place, but I think we could do more, and that's what I wanted to achieve. So I went to graduate school and got a PhD in digital media, focused on educational data mining and learning analytics to understand what kids are learning as they play, with a lot of event stream data, lots of clicks and drags involved. From there, I went on to bring that expertise to EA and Zynga, working with GlassLab, which is a nonprofit company that really built things like SimCity EDU, Words with Friends EDU, Plants vs. Zombies EDU, to have commercial polished games that actually support learning. So we have the best of both learning and engagement, and that's also what brought me to Age of Learning next. The platform that the API that I helped design in graduate school was called Adage, and it was about leveraging big data to understand what students learn as they play. I brought that to EA and Zynga in my work with GlassLab, and it is currently the foundation of our learning analytics initiatives here at Age of Learning. On the team, I'm product owner of Learning Analytics for Mastery. We have an integrated team that really strives to support really rigorous, aligned, engaging game design for learning. So we have strong curriculum experts. We have a really amazing game design team with system designers, game designers, artists, animators, and engineers, QA, the whole full team of game developers, as well as data scientists and researchers. So we kind of merged the best of two worlds of highly polished commercial games and strong learning guidance and optimizing learning outcomes. Our platform is geared towards enabling personalized learning for students, which is also personally what drives me in my work with students. I really wanted to help build something that would scale and give a lot of students across a lot of different backgrounds access to a personalized learning experience. That was something as a teacher that was frustrating. I didn't feel like I could give every single student all of the help they needed all the time, and I wanted to be a part of something that could.
Great, thank you, Liz. So the way I felt like would be the best to kick off this topic, so how do we get to here? How do we get to this era of big data, and particularly with education? And if you look at some of the changes that have recently been happening, it's around digital access to educational content. With the work we do at Age of Learning, we have millions of kids in our platform, both from our commercial product that we offer to parents, as well as through our educational access initiatives, where we look to ensure that all kids have access to ABC Mouse content through schools, where we offer our product for free to teachers in classrooms. We have 65,000 teachers using it free in their classrooms on a monthly basis, encompassing millions of kids. In addition, we offer free in libraries, including here at Glendale Public Library, where we have, nationally, we have 360% of the libraries in the U.S. We have over 1 million sessions happening in these libraries on an annual basis, or certainly last year. So as we look to a company, as we are an education and technology company, we look at ways to drive efficacy and results and learning outcomes. How do we help kids achieve gains in core academic or foundational academic skills they need to be successful in life, and in their academics, of course. And so this idea of access, which we've seen really, I would call it the first revolution or evolution in educational technology. Specifically, outside of ABC Mouse, if you look at other services targeted at K-12, such as Khan Academy. Khan Academy started by Saul Khan, an individual teacher who wanted to do videos online so more students could get the skills they needed as well, similar to our mission. The Khan Academy now has courses covering multiple subjects, that's K-12. 12 million students use Khan Academy on a monthly basis. You know, if you compare that to the history of traditional education, which started with a single room classroom with one teacher with a few kids, to the evolution now with districts with hundreds of thousands of students, and maybe even a million students if you look at New York. Khan Academy alone has, with the 12 million students it serves, has more students in the top 50 school districts in the U.S. Imagine the amount of data that's being generated through those interactions with that student. If you look at the higher ed space, in the last few years, about 5 years ago, Andrew Ng started, with a co-founder, a company called Coursera. Coursera is a massive online open course forum. Traditionally, access to higher ed was limited to place and time. You had to be at Stanford to attend the Andrew Ng class. You had to be at Harvard at a certain time when Clay Christensen was teaching about Innovator's Dilemma. All of that is now available through Coursera or edX or other platforms. Coursera as a platform has 24 million users on a monthly basis. The entire student base of higher ed in the U.S., when you take community college, plus four-year degrees, plus postgraduate work, is 20 million. So there's more students on Coursera than there are students attending higher ed in the U.S. So you can see the power of the platforms there. Specifically, if you look at Andrew Ng's class itself, which is on machine learning, 1 million students have signed up for that class since it was first offered. 1 million students in one class. As a freshman in college, the 200, 300 people in the class was the biggest it got. So that's all the access you had before. Now you have millions of kids learning from arguably one of the best and brightest minds in machine learning in the world. So what does that mean to us? What does that mean in terms of this ability, now that it's digital access, and you have these students in the classroom, what does it mean in terms of being able to track every click, track every video watched or not watched? Why was that decision made to cancel? To track every quiz question asked, whether the answer be right or the answer be wrong, or course completed or started. All that data is now available to us. And in this age of big data and machine learning, it's our opportunity to leverage the computational power that's available to us to really understand and drive educational outcome through this understanding of what these clicks mean to us and how we can drive forward better educational outcomes. Great. So with that, I'd like to kick it off to Armin to talk about something that is, very clear to us as an employer here in Glendale with 600 people, nearly a quarter of which are engineers, there's just a dearth of trained computer scientists and trained people with skills in data sciences and beyond. A recent survey showed that there are 1.4 million computer science jobs available and only 400,000 qualified graduates to fill those jobs. So as someone that's a teacher in higher ed, talk to us about the skills and what you're seeing and how you see the opportunity for programmers and beyond in your classroom.
So I guess the first thing I'll say is, at least from my experience, there's a huge variation in the level of competency and understanding of the students we get. We have some high school students, recent high school graduates that come to us and say, oh yeah, I was in this robotics competition in high school, or I wrote this app on my free time, and they already have some fundamental understanding of what programming is, how you go about doing those things, what the terminology is. And we have lots of students that have no idea what any of that means, other than just being able to use an iPhone, don't really understand what's behind it, what's driving it, how those things are developed. So I think for us, the lack of standardization in curriculum and K through 12 in terms of, we all say that we want to increase the technical literacy of elementary school students and high school students. People are using technology in their lives every day, right? So it makes sense that we should understand how that technology works and how we can leverage it for whatever we end up doing as a career. But I think there's still a long way to go in terms of how do we educate students, how do we get them to a level where we feel they're competent, so that when they start college or start a career, they can put those tools to use. I think there's a lot of opportunity in learning how to program, learning about how machine learning works, AI, all of these buzzwords that we throw around, but really it comes down to understanding data. And I think Liz is going to talk about this also. But I think at the end of the day, there's no difference between you or me sitting down and looking at a bunch of graphs and charts and pictures and trying to understand what that all means versus a computer trying to do that. And so, except that the computers can do it much, much faster than a human can. So if you take that kind of perception that we have as humans intuitively, and you can figure out a way to automate it, the same way that factories are not automated and people aren't welding cars together or things like that. If we can automate those types of tasks, then we can learn about our world and the data set that we're trying to understand much better. And that's a very valuable skill for students, I think, going forward. I think we're still at the point where we're talking about how to teach kids how to code and how to program, which I feel like is already 10 years behind the curve. Every single person in this room should know how to program. It's not hard. I can do it. It's not hard. It's really not about writing code. It's about being able to automate tasks. And if you use Excel and you filtered some data, sorted some columns, that's already kind of programming. So if you can do that with Python or C or some other language with a much larger data set, like how many people are viewing my website, or like Sunil saying, what are they clicking on, what are they not clicking on, those are very useful pieces of information to have. So I think going forward, it's going to be really important for students to understand what AI means, what machine learning means, and be able to use those tools to develop more advanced systems that can understand all this data around us. So I want to circle back and say, so access to information. We're now in a paradigm where we don't have to worry about how do we get students the information. Can we get them into a lecture hall and can we get them to listen to this guy talk for an hour about whatever subject? There's so much information out there, as we all know, on the internet. It's really about filtering that information. I can send my students off they say, how do I do this? Or how do I learn about a PID controller or whatever they want to figure out? And instead of, I could spend the time and do it, talk to them myself. Or I could say, go look at them on YouTube. And I do a lot, because a lot of times there's someone much smarter than me explaining it, and the content is free and it's there and it's available, and they can read about all of the prominent researchers in the field have contributed to the Wikipedia article. So I think access to information is commonplace. Now we have to teach students how to go and find the information that's important to them. so that they can make decisions based on what that data means.
Fantastic. So, as Liz and I work in the K-12 space, and early ed in particular, one of the things that astounds us and speaks to some of the skill gaps in trying to have students prepared for future success in higher ed is how poorly our current educational system delivers for the majority of our children. If you look at national assessment data, national assessment for educational progress, we find that by the time kids are fourth graders, 9 and 10 years old, 60% of them are not proficient in math and language arts skills. That's 60%, and that's nationally. In states like Alabama and Mississippi, 75% of children by the time they're in fourth grade. And I'll tell you this, there's no question that the number of that are not proficient by the time they're seniors, and by the time they go to community college or other higher ed or go to work, is even lower. So we're systematically failing the majority of our kids in this country, providing them the basic skills. And a lot of the work that we're looking at doing, or we are doing at Age of Learning, is to address that skills. And Liz can talk to us, or the question I guess, Liz, is, talk to that work and in terms of, how do we use data that we collect to actually make a difference and deliver educational outcomes?
So as I think we talked a lot about, there's huge potential with education technology, especially in the form of engaging learning games, to reach a lot of students. So problems that it solves are that it can allow access, especially through library initiatives and public school initiatives, and being available on a tablet, which is among the cheapest form of computer. Now, there's less and less an accessibility issue around the technology itself. This is reflected in Pew Report data that shows that more and more people especially have access to a computer or a tablet on a regular basis. So we're able to reach a lot of people. We're also able to personalize learning. So in a sense, it's like having a tutor for every student kind of embedded in the software if it's done well. Doing that well is difficult, which is what our sort of department is really dedicated to, is creating engaging, personalized learning experiences. So I think it really can reach a lot of students and support personalized learning, and that's a huge part of the reach. I'd like to actually speak a little bit to the point about coding. I think computer or computational literacy, I should say, or coding skills and related things are a basic literacy in our time. I think that initiatives around closing the gender gap in availability and accessibility of that education is really important. I know as a young girl, I didn't feel like, oh, well, coding is, I felt like coding is for boys. And I think that's something I got over, and now I can code. But I think that we need to keep those doors open to support everybody in that kind of literacy. That includes introducing more widespread or more national standards on computational literacy, and then the advent of organizations like Girls Who Code is a really great step in the right direction. So I think it is a fundamental literacy for our age in the digital world we live in, and I'd love to see that empowered as we move forward. I mean, hopefully, I don't know, as I was younger, playing games was for nerdy dudes who live in their mom's basement, right? But as I got, and I was also a gamer as a 7th grader. I felt really ashamed about it because I was a girl and I wasn't supposed to be a gamer. So I think that stigma is really now it's just pervasive. Like, everybody plays games. Everybody's on their phone all the time, at least playing casual games or more. So I think that is really fading, and I think in parallel, access to coding, encouragement to learning to code and coding education is key. There's a lot of great work being done on that. So, right, so the other, let's see, the pieces.
Oh, for education, yeah.
Can I have one last? Okay. So for teachers, I think that the other thing that machine learning can help us solve, or big data in education can help us solve, is supporting teachers in classrooms, not replacing them by any means, but supporting teacher efforts to personalize learning. We have a lot of initiatives now with advocacy studies and working with school districts across the country and doing just that. There's also a lot of kindergarten and pre-K teachers that use ABC Mouse in support of their day-to-day curriculum. So that's another big piece of what we do.
Sure. So to stick with the topic that both of you talked about, a bit diversity and gender, specifically gender in programming. Interesting as I was researching for this panel, I found that women now make up 56% of our professional workforce, but only 25% of our programmers. And as Liz, as you as a child growing up, and then through your academic work and from your classes that you teach, it'd be great to get your perspectives on what is happening in the classroom now, and actually the number of women in your courses, as well as how has that changed over time, and what potential barriers do you see to women entering the workforce as computer scientists and programmers?
Okay, yeah, so that's a really interesting question. We were talking about this earlier before the panel, and I was telling Sunil, so I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. I was a mechanical engineering major, and we get like classes of 30 or 40 people, and like maybe one, maybe two were girls, because very predominantly a male degree. But I feel like, at least my work at GCC, I feel like things are getting better or more equalized. I'd say about 30% of our students are female, so definitely not anywhere near the 54% that would reflect the population as a whole, but I think that things are moving in the right direction. I think a lot of it has to do with what you mentioned, or what Liz mentioned, this idea that engineering or math or science or programming is kind of a male profession, just total BS, right? I mean, especially in this day and age, these are skills that we all need, even if you're like a graphic designer or a journalist or whatever. So I think that perception is totally changing. I think as educators, it's our responsibility to try and force that change to happen as quickly as possible. And I think some of it might also have to do with a lot of the faculty still is male. So when we pick projects or we think of things that would engage students, we probably have this bias towards things that male students are more interested in. So I think being aware of that bias and trying to tailor the curriculum so that it's more balanced across interests of the entire student population, not just female versus male, but also different ethnic backgrounds and things like that. I think those things we can become aware of them and make our educational system better. And I think mining big data based on all these wonderful tools that are being developed that are tracking what students are doing and what interests them, I think is a really powerful way to do that.
Another interesting extension of that is that we're really, the advent of technology and a maker culture where you can make your own things and distribute it to people in this age of information really speaks to the power of coding and creating your own things and sharing them, even if it's basic coding, like putting together a web page where you want to share content, or computational literacy where you know how to find sites and post things that you would like to share with people. That's on one end, and the other end is doing really fancy stuff, publishing apps and building your own tools. So it's really, we're shifting from a culture of consumers to producers. I mean, you see on YouTube all the time people making their own videos and sharing things. And the maker space is a whole area of study, which is really interesting. I mean, the Burning Man is an extreme example, but there's a lot of people out there who just create stuff and they go share it, and then burn it, I guess. But the digital space is not dissimilar to that now, and so I think what Armin was saying is true. It's really empowering to be able to work in that space and share things. And in hand with that is building fundamental skills of literacy and confidence in your own computational abilities and language expression abilities to be able to get to that point. And those foundational skills are what ABC Mouse helps to support and foster the creative thinkers and systems thinkers and problem solvers of the future.
Great, thank you. In terms of
Sorry, if I can add on to that really quick. So this makerspace movement, you may have heard about it a little bit, or just the making movement in general. I mean, that's really a very interesting thing happening right now. And I hadn't heard it phrased that way, but I really like that. We're transitioning from kind of society of consumers to producers. I think that's really cool. The Glendale Library has a makerspace. And if you don't know what a makerspace is, it's basically just we call it a lab in the olden days. It's just a space with a bunch of tools and equipment, like things that are common are 3D printers, maybe laser cutters. They even have sewing machines, some painting equipment. Just a creative place where you can have access to all these things and bring your ideas to life. And so just being able to learn how to use those tools is really empowering across the board, because all of us have ideas, all of us have things that we'd like to see happen in real life, and those types of spaces, a lot of times I don't even know if there's a membership fee for the one here. I think it's free. So just being able to go in and create something out of your imagination and have it become a real thing is really cool. And we're trying to ingrain that into the student population also, to just get at them from a very young age and empower them to think that way and to learn how to use all these tools, so that we have a society of people that can produce all sorts of amazing technology that we've never even thought of yet.
I also think that games themselves encourage boundary testing and discovery. So, I mean, when you think about playing a more complex game or a more complex video game, part of the fun is testing out what different things do until you discover an underlying rule system. And then you operate within that rule system to win or achieve whatever goal you have as the game player. So just the medium of games is really supportive of that kind of discovery mindset.
Great. In terms of being educators in classrooms, both of you, kind of what tools, I mean, for you now, do you wish you had, or you wish you had, I guess, or have to better deliver the instruction you want or the outcomes you want in your classrooms? And then Liz, the same question to you as you were educated.
So I think that tools like the ones that your company is developing that allow personalized learning, and I'll take a step back. So I have this kind of belief that education up until now has been basically trying to cram the same information into all of our skulls, no matter what our interests are, no matter what our development, where we are in our development process. Every student is supposed to come out of high school knowing these subjects, and they should all be equally good at it. Okay, how many companies do you guys know where everyone knows the same thing? That'd be a pretty boring place to work, right? So in real life, everyone has their specialty and expertise, and it's the collaboration of those expertise that create a good company. So being able to personalize learning and figure out what students are struggling with or really interested in, and being able to tailor the education for that individual student, I think is extremely powerful and something that we haven't been able to do until now. And I think just starting to learn how to do. So that's very exciting. We were talking about YouTube videos or lectures that are online. So when I give a lecture in my class, my brain is continuously gauging the student's involvement. I'm going to do it now with all of you. So are you bored? Are you interested? Is it over your head, or is it like, am I speaking down to you? So I'm constantly trying to tailor the lecture to keep people engaged. That's something you can't do with an online lecture, right? It's just recorded, pre-recorded, and a student might find it engaging or not. So being able to figure out what they're paying attention to, what they're clicking on, and then tailoring the lecture to that, I think is a super useful tool that I see on the horizon.
I think it's a really important point that something that traditional, or in the past, public education has put forward is a paradigm of direct instruction where kids' heads are unscrewed and then you pour things in there and close the lid again, which is not really how people learn, we've discovered in the learning sciences. So project-based learning initiatives has been more and more pervasive, and I think that educational technology allows us the virtual spaces and simulations to be able to understand and assess project-based learning as it's happening. That's one of the capabilities that there are, and then they can complement other forms of assessment or measurement, like multiple choice tests, which certainly have their place, but it really empowers different forms of engagement with the subjects. Speaking in terms of gaps or areas to fill in, I found one of my biggest successes, I think, in teaching is that our school is able to adopt a really powerful project-based learning pedagogy, which really had students in charge of their own learning, where teachers actually shifted back into a facilitator position with very carefully constructed projects that had a lot of planning going into them. It's interesting. So before we went into the classroom in a day of project-based learning, there would be hours and hours and hours of preparation. But then when we got into the classroom, as the teacher, it was the easiest period I taught, because I sat back and let the students take charge of their own learning. And I was a facilitator, I was supporting them, but that part of that empowerment came from the agency in what they were doing. They were creating solutions to problems. And I think the Common Core standards and current standards try to address things like systems thinking and creative problem solving, but we don't have good ways to assess that. A multiple choice question is not necessarily the best way to address how a student might creatively solve a problem and what their process is in solving that. And so, big data and technology can really help us understand that better. I think gaps are in the cool stuff that's out there in teaching, problem solving, and creative systems thinking, and then our ability to assess that. And we're still closing that gap with new methods and data mining and machine learning. Let me just stop and talk about what machine learning is. I think it's a term that machine learning gets thrown around a lot, but what is it? Well, one definition, let me look at my notes, is basically a computer system that automatically learns and improves without being explicitly programmed to do so. So it's a piece of code or an algorithm that can learn from data as it's being fed data and improve its accuracy or information gain. And so that's important because we can't stop every hour and reprogram the system, right? We have to have things that run in the background that learn from what the students are doing and then use that information to optimize the next thing the student sees. And that's, I think, the potential here with machine learning. I think gaps, similar to the K through 12 space where we're trying to teach creative problem solving, making connections across subjects, looking at Bloom's taxonomy, the upper levels of Bloom's taxonomy, like synthesis and critical thinking across skills, evaluation, rather than just fact memorization. That also applies to disciplines like data science. So data science is also a widely used term that's ill-defined. I think data science, it has the word science in it, or scientist in it, which implies a level of rigor that's not always there. So data science doesn't just mean that you're able to program an algorithm. Because I could learn how to use a power saw. Okay, so I learn how to use a power saw and I can operate it really well, and I can walk over to the wall and drill a hole using the power saw in the wall. Great. What did that solve? Right? Like, so learning the tools is one piece of it, but applying it to the right places, understanding whether your tool works well or not, validating your analyses is really important. Connecting it to a larger research question. What are we trying to solve here? What insight are we looking for? And how do we know this is a good model? Especially when you have millions of dollars of development based on your answer. So if somebody's going to change a product based on your analysis, it might be nice to know that it's a strong analysis and that it answers an important question. So I think, engineering is computer engineering is a really important part of data science, but it's also a bigger picture view of context, research, and finding rigor and meaning in results. that's an area that could be addressed, I think, in data science programs, because right now there's a lot of demand for data science, but there's few applicants or qualified people, and I think rounding out the education there would be really helpful.
Yeah, let me just add to that. I think that that's actually a really critical point. I think that all of us could, go online or find a textbook and learn how to use these tools, like learn what AI is and how to use a machine learning platform, and that's probably not the hard part. I mean, it might take some time, but I think the really hard part that we need to learn as a society and teach, students is how to interpret that data, right? And I guess the current political environment is a great example of this, right? There's this whole talk of fake news. But it's a really interesting question. How do you know what you can trust? How do you know what's really going on? And what are the motivations of the sources that you're getting the news from? Right? That's no different than what we're talking about. We use something called finite element analysis in engineering. It's basically a way to create a mathematical model that will do some very complex calculations of things that we can't write an elegant equation to solve. And we use it for things like stress analysis, like if I jump up and down on the stage, is it going to break or not? Something like that. And nowadays, the tools are so easy to use and so well integrated into the software that the students use that they can learn how to use it in like a day. And it took me, like an entire semester. We had to write out the equations by hand, and it took a long time. But the interesting thing is, sometimes they show me this analysis, and it's like really cool and has really pretty graphs and plots. I'm like, but that's not right. The answer's not right. Like, but I put it in the program, and this is what it told me. It's got to be right. I'm like, no, your assumptions have to be correct. You have to understand kind of what the answer is supposed to look like before you even start. You have to understand the material you're using. There's all sorts of stuff that is more important than the actual process of solving the problem. Right? I think in school we focus a lot on how to solve a problem, but really in real life, or at least in engineering, I feel like the hard part is not solving a problem, because usually we just use software for that. It's how do you set up the problem to get the answer that is going to inform a decision that you're going to make that's going to result in spending real money and real people's time, and if you don't do it right, maybe your company goes under. Right? So that all comes into what we call experimentation setup or design. Really, that's a big part of what we're talking about here. It's not just how do you use this tool to do machine learning and AI and all these fancy terms. It's how do you get useful information out of this pile of data that's sitting in front of you. And I don't think that's any different than the problems we've had in the past, except that now we have terabytes and terabytes of information, and you can't hire a bunch of interns to go and sort through it over summer, right? So we have to do it automated.
I think that's another challenge in the data science field is the reality is it's 85% data cleaning and organization. And it's about 5% sexy parts of running an analysis and coming up with an amazing finding or graph. Like it's really a lot of work around data cleaning because you're drowning in data. And a lot of event stream data needs going through and cleaning and organizing and figuring out what's relevant and what's not. And data mining, we use algorithms to help us understand what's relevant, but there's a basic level of, hey, what did this event stream event mean? Was that when the student pushed the back button? Was that when the student quit? What event was that even corresponding to, right? So basic understanding of what the data is telling us before we can even put it into a smart, fancy equation. Another point is, a lot of people like to talk about deep learning, which are neural networks and crazy algorithms, which can be very useful, but the reality is that the simplest algorithm you can use to solve a problem is often the best. And that's another takeaway from data science that people don't always talk about. So I just thought I'd throw those in there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, we're at the 45-minute point. I'd love to get some questions from the floor. Anyone? All right, up front, please.
So I got a 10-year-old and 7-year-old. What do you recommend as far as in addition to school, which is not enough? I don't know what they're doing. How do you supplement that to get them what they need to be? Like either paid, not a program you could pay for, design. What's out there? What can we do?
actually, my colleagues are better equipped to answer that question, but I'll take a shot. I think that I'm not familiar with all of the names of the platforms and everything, but I know that the fact that the internet is out there and connects all of us together, there's so much information out there. I would really encourage them to, and maybe with some guidance, right, because the internet can be a scary place, but see what's out there and what works for your kids in terms of the way they engage with that software or those videos or whatever it may be. And I don't think that, and there's probably after-school programs with actual instructors too that utilize technology that might be effective.
I think, so in terms of computer or computational literacy, Scratch is a program that's a visual programming language that's come out of MIT, and it's free. You can download it and play around with it, and it's a way for kids to kind of experiment with programming really early. And it doesn't require typing. It's literally you think about what function you want, and you drag an icon onto a kind of a sandbox looking screen, and you drag an icon on that represents an action, and then you can drag other things on there to connect with that action. So if you want to have a character move, let's say we want to program a game, like we want to build a little piece of a game, and you're 7 or 10. I drag the icon that says character, basically. This is a very simplified explanation. And then you can drag an icon that has an action. It looks like run. And then you connect them. And then your character can come to life. You can see the animation happen. That's oversimplified. It actually does incorporate really important principles of coding into the way that the icons are structured and connected. But that's a nice program. There's a lot of support in that community around building things in Scratch. I know that there's also camps. I mean, I know about Girls Who Code just because that's kind of, I'm passionate about that organization, but there's a lot of organizations similar that can support supplemental learning. And a lot of them are nonprofits and probably not very expensive or free. So I would maybe look around for things in this area that are offered. And probably blended learning is a nice way to do it, where there's some kind of online supplement and then you have face-to-face support with the teacher program.
I think I'd be remiss not to mention that ABC Mouse would be perfect for your 7-year-old.
Absolutely.
As a starting point, and there's a lot of fantastic software out there. Tinker has about 50 million users on it and about 5 million active on a monthly basis. A fantastic computer program, or fantastic program to introduce kids to visual languages. And even Minecraft with the right YouTube videos is a great experience for young kids in terms of crafting. And it's not necessarily coding, but it really is a creator community and a producer community. And I found for my kids certainly it was a fantastic experience for them. So really to get into the love and enjoyment of seeing something that they're creating, and sharing that with others.
I'll also add, because that was really big. There's a company called Rolling Robots in Glendale. They do camps for kids where they teach basic robotics concepts. Python is a really easy programming language to learn if you want to do like actual, non-graphical based programming, kind of at a higher level. And then, when they're a little older, they can come check out our classes at Glendale Community College. We have an intro to robotics class, intro to engineering, and just a number of classes, some on 3D printing, things like that.
And to that extent, if you're interested in programming with your child, go on Coursera, take a course, introduction to CS from Stanford or from Harvard on edX. They're all available. They actually make it really easy for a non-programmer. And they're intended for your first programming class, your 101 class at college. And I think it's very accessible for probably not your 7-year-old, but your older child, certainly. In the back, and then we'll come to you in front.
You've mentioned how ABC Mouse is, you're responding to the needs of the students. Is there a specific area that you feel that you're developing a lot more content for than other areas? Obviously signifying some sort of larger gap in the education system.
Well, I mean, for ABC Mouse specifically, we feel like our focus, we're comprehensive in terms of covering multiple subject areas, but based on the data we're seeing, there's still such a.
Jackie, I am coming out.
Oh, there we go. The AI is after us. The focus, where we're seeing that there's such a skills gap in early education with foundational skills in math and English language arts. That is our primary area of focus, though we do cover science and music and art and social sciences as well. But there's so much work still for us to do to help solve this, what I call an educational crisis with foundational skills in math and English in this country. That is where we're focusing a lot of our efforts, or continue to focus a lot of our efforts. Okay, no problem.
So you talked about how Learning has so much data that's collecting about users, and I'd love to know what are some ways that you would have improved the user experience using that data?
Thank you.
Hi. So our area of focus in our department that we're working on a personalized learning game system. So it's released now. It's a Math Mastery app connected to ABC Learning, and it's a separate app you download. And what we do is we understand, even within one game, how a student is responding to the game mechanics and answering questions and interacting with the fun characters, and what that says about what they know at that time, and then we adapt the next round or the next game specifically to their level of knowledge that they've just demonstrated. So it's essentially, moment-to-moment adaptation to what the student needs, and there are tailored levels of feedback to the students. So I can be Jane. I'm Jane, I'm 5. I know my numbers really well. I get through the numeral ID game and I get everything right. Great, so then Jane gets moved forward a few levels to another game that's more advanced, it's a lot more suitable for her. And then Bob comes on, Bob's also 5. Bob has a little bit of a gap. He doesn't know the number 4 very well. So he goes through the game, he might miss number 4 and not know what that is. And the next rounds of gameplay and the following recommended activities focus on the areas that he needs to grow and supports his growth and scaffolds his learning for him. So it's really very adaptive in the app, and there's been a lot of investment in that, and it's something that we're really proud of as a team, and we have really good results from efficacy studies so far in school districts in the effectiveness of the system and personalized learning.
Okay, any other questions? Oh, sorry, someone over here.
What would you say would be 1 or 2 hard, concrete concepts that a young child can understand that would lead them into success in programming? So, for example, if you're going to be a scientist, something you can teach a child early would be a scientific method, hypothesis, and tests. For robotics, you have to understand degrees of freedom and vectorization of motion in order to make that happen. For programming, as parents, if we have 1, 2, 3-year-olds that we can't take to like a wing robotics yet, what are some basic principles that we should instill early that builds the mind of a programmer?
Yeah, at the end of the day, programming is just a language. It's like learning a language, right? So it doesn't matter if we're speaking English or Chinese or whatever. Really, underneath all that is logic. So what you're trying to do is, and there's a distinction between coding and computer science. You're trying to architect a logical model to make decisions. So it's very heavily based on if this happens and this happens, then what do you do as a result? Just understanding those kind of logical fundamentals, concepts of loops, like if this happens, you want to do something more than once, or just the decision trees. Those types of concepts are really what programming is all about. It's just code is how we make it happen in our physical world.
I think it is. I mean, it literally is like a language. When I was teaching myself to code later in life, I realized I needed to code every day, just like I would need to practice a new language I was learning every day. And it's comprised of grammar, So understanding, I mean, this is sort of cheesy, but understanding grammatical structures in your own language and having a command of language itself is actually helpful in transitioning to understanding the consistent grammatical structures in code. As Armin mentioned, cause and effect is another concept that can be reached through a number of domains. So you can look at that through a math lens. You can look at that through a history lens, understanding that if you allow a dictator to have a lot of power, chances are you'll have a world war, that kind of thing, right? So also systems thinking. So getting into these 21st century skills or softer skills is really helpful when you get to moving through the coding domain.
All right, anyone else with a question? If not, let's have maybe a final statement from each of you in terms of what you want to leave with. And this is a surprise to
Yeah, I guess my message would just be, there's so much information out there, and I know with me also, like, we're all so busy in our day-to-day lives that it's really hard to find time to learn new things, but, you know, we're at an age where if you're not learning every day, then you're falling behind, and if I don't learn something new, and on a regular basis, I'll probably be out of work in 20 years. So I think that's a very true statement for our society where we're at right now. And the good news is that there's so much stuff that's very accessible, and you don't have to sit through a lecture that's 10 weeks long or whatever. You can go find information online, and maybe usually you're looking for something very specific, right? So you can find that pretty quickly using search engines and reading articles online or watching videos. So that would be my message, I guess, is be curious, go out and explore. I would say check out makerspaces if you haven't yet, and I think that's a really fun and empowering thing. Learn how to code because it will make your life better and easier, and it's not that hard. And yeah, I'll just plug our robotics program. If you want more information on that, you can go to glendale.edu/robotics. And we actually do put a lot of course content on there, so you can look at that for free and learn about the classes that we offer, and I'll be available later if you have questions for me. Thank you.
I really like that message, and I think that coding is an extension of a creative gesture where you're putting something new out in the world. And seeing it that way, it can be very empowering, especially when somebody's new to it, and it's really intimidating when you see a screen full of gibberish that you don't understand, and suddenly something comes out of that. So framing it like you are empowering yourself to create something new. And even looking at big data, which I think is used so often that it has a stigma or people are just tired of hearing about it. Big data really, the key is that it allows us insight to optimize learning for kids, and that's how we're applying it at Age of Learning. And I think that's a really important mission for it, that insights into how people think through problems is a huge boon for our educational pursuits, and that we should use big data to empower students, and we can. So seeing it in that lens is really important as we move forward in the space.
Thank you both. In terms of my message, and I couldn't agree more with both of you in terms of we all need to be lifelong learners. The learning experience never changes, and no time in history has there been more opportunities for us to learn. Access to education is available everywhere, and I think from an insight and data perspective, our opportunity going forward to actualize the true benefits of technology and education in terms of making a really large and significant difference in our society has never been better than it is now, and what it will be in the future. So with that, thank you very much for attending, and thank you too for being on panel.